Passover. We are to celebrate Passover as an eternal ordinance. How do we know that? In Exodus 12, verse 14. It says, "And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. You shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever." If that's the case, we need to understand more what Passover is all about. About 3,500 years ago, the descendants of Abraham, known as the Hebrews, were enslaved by Pharaoh in Egypt. So at the right appointed time, God decided it was time to free the Hebrews and bring them to the promised land. So he rose up a man named Moses and sent him to Pharaoh to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Pharaoh said, "No, I'm not going to let them go." And the Lord told Moses, "Tell him I'm going to send 10 plagues upon him, and then you will let them go." So the Lord did that. He sent 10 plagues upon Egypt. Plagues like the water turning to blood, frogs everywhere, lice, flies, cattle disease, hail and fire, locusts, great darkness, and finally the death of the firstborn. It is that death of the firstborn which you want to have emphasis on. That's what Passover is all about. So the Lord said that he was going to send an angel of death and go throughout the land of Egypt and kill every firstborn of beast and man. But he didn't want the Hebrews hurt, so he told the Hebrews a way out to prevent that in their lives. He told them, "Take you a little lamb, check it over, make sure it has no blemish and no faults to it." In other words, sinless. Take that lamb into your house on the 10th day of the month of Nisan and observe it for 4 days to see if you find anything wrong with the lamb. And at the end of the 4 days, they were to kill it on the 14th of Nisan. And they are to take the blood of that lamb and apply it on the doorposts of their house. The Lord also commanded them that they were to roast the lamb, and then they were to eat all of it and leave none till morning. And they were not to break any bones of the lamb. Remember that. It's important on the next part of the story. So we actually had a fulfillment of Passover later through the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, or Jesus the Christ. He is the Lamb of God. John the Baptist called him the Lamb of God. And Yeshua came into Jerusalem on the 10th of Nisan. And there for the next 4 days he was examined by the scribes, the Pharisees, and the priests. And they found no fault with him either. But they didn't like him, so they did something to make sure that they had cause to have him killed. So on the 14th of Nisan, they crucified him. And at that time he suffered greatly and died, and thus the roasting of the lamb. But before he died, he instituted a Last Supper or communion, a new covenant Passover, where they are to partake of him as bread and wine to remember all that he did. But there's another cause where it says you are to eat all of the lamb. It is to mean you are to take all of the Passover lamb into you. Everything he said, everything he did for us, all his commandments, everything, we are to appropriate that into our life. So now Yeshua was dead on the cross as evening came. And they had to take him down because they said the Sabbath was at hand. But John 19:31 tells us it was a high Sabbath. That means it was not the weekly Sabbath. It was the first Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread represents sinlessness. So they took Yeshua down and they buried him on that day, which was probably a Wednesday night. Now remember what Yeshua said before he was crucified. He'll be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. You can't get that on a Friday night, but you can get it on a Wednesday night to the early morning hours of Sunday. So more than likely he was crucified on a Wednesday night. And if you back that up, on the 10th of Nisan, that would have been a Sabbath. That's why there were so many people there when he came into Jerusalem. So now Yeshua was buried on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. However, on the 3rd day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread week, there is another feast that you can read about in Leviticus 23. And that feast is called the Feast of First Fruits. And it was on that feast that Yeshua rose from the dead and showed that all who believe in him will have a resurrection and a new body and a glorious body like Yeshua had when he rose from the dead. It was a great promise to all who appropriate the blood of Yeshua, the Lamb of God, into their lives. Hi, Pastor Allan here. I want to thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like the video and leave comments below. If you want more of this content, I would encourage you to subscribe.